All right, I want to go over a brief lecture just to go over the finishing up part of the drone, just so you can see the calendar for the rest of the semester. We have today, which is the 26th. We have Wednesday, which is the 28th. Those are work days. We'll have the 3rd of next week as a work day, and then the 5th is when everything is due. So you'll have your drone assignment due, you'll have your demo reel due. I'll go over that on Monday, a week from today. And then your final exam you'll do as well. The final exam you'll come in at 11 o'clock. 11:05 I'll go through what the final exam is. You'll have until 1:55 to turn in the final exam. The other two things, the demo reel and the drone, you'll have the whole day to turn those in. So if you needed to work on them next class or later in the day and turn them in after, you could do that as well. The demo reel is the shortest assignment we have. It literally is just taking all your pieces and making it into a movie. It's pretty simple to do. On the 10th, we're going to go through and watch all the demo reels. And then the 12th is your day to grab your files off your computer. It's my day to make sure that I have everything graded, and then if there's anything on the computers I need to retrieve or anything, it just gives me a little bit more time to make sure I've gone over everything. Okay, so we're coming down to the last literally 3 weeks of class, which is crazy. This is what we're going to be doing for the drone. Is we're going to be animating this, obviously. Part of it I'm going to show you how to animate inside of Cinema. Part of it I'm going to show you how to animate inside of KeyShot. The reason for that is because sometimes you may want to add animations inside KeyShot. You may want to add animations inside Cinema. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go through and start organizing my stuff. When I animate it, I have to think about the big picture of how this whole thing animates. Ideally, what should happen is, in this case, the propellers are going to spin. That generates enough power to then lift the thing off the ground. When the thing lifts off the ground, all the pieces then move with it. Okay. So I have my drone body, which is there. It's all labeled. I have my propeller here. All my pieces inside this are already labeled except for that, which is the motor housing. And if that one's not labeled, then I'm pretty sure then the other ones won't be labeled either, but we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to go to each one of these things, and I'm going to hit C on it, and that will then bake those items in, right? So all of the subdivision surfaces, all that stuff gets baked in, locked into these objects. So now they're separate objects all by themselves. I'll do the same thing to this one. Because I instanced the other ones, I have to do those first. Then I can come back to this one and then hit it on there. Okay, so now I should have nothing inside here that has any kind of symmetry, any kind of cloner or anything. Everything should be just straight up exactly geometry. When you go from one program to another, that's very important. If I were to try to take something that has a MoGraph cloner into KeyShot, it may not come in correctly, okay, because KeyShot doesn't recognize what a cloner is. The same thing for if I was to take this into a gaming engine or into a Substance Painter to paint different textures on it. All of those things won't travel between different softwares. So when we do that, we want to make sure that they are the highest quality and then they are all geometry, which it looks like they are. Okay. So now I'm going to go through and start labeling stuff. So this will be prop 01. Oops. And then this one will be prop 02. I like to also come up with a nice naming convention as I do my stuff so that everything is pretty consistent. Like this is called Drone Bubble, but it's a capital D, capital B. I'm going to lowercase the first one. Same thing here. And the cylinder is something that I added. It's just like a little antenna type thing on top. So I'm just going to call this antenna. All right. So those are all my items there. I'm going to go into these. Just kind of organize these together so they're by each other. There we go. All right. I'm going to look at things that I may want to color the same color. This will become obvious when we get into KeyShot of why we're doing that. But things like the propellers are pretty much going to be the same color from one to the other. If you look at some drones, sometimes they have lines on them or whatever. You could definitely do stuff like that, but I'm just going to give them a flat color. So inside of Cinema, I'm just creating a flat material. I'm going to turn off all of these things and just turn luminance on and just give it a solid bright color, blue. Drop it on there. Okay, so now they're all bright blue. Then I'm going to go to the propeller caps. Those will all get a different color. The naming of the materials doesn't matter right now. It's just kind of making sure that they have something separate assigned. When we get into KeyShot, KeyShot will use this as a way to separate the different items. So when we assign a material in KeyShot, it'll say anything with this blue material will all get the same material. That way I don't have to manually grab them again and do it. It's all right there. Here's the body of this, so I will assign a new material to that. Turn this off, that on. And you'll see I'm just doing the luminance and just giving it a color for now. We'll assign some labels to those as well. There's the motor housings. The color doesn't matter, we can change the color later. It's just getting something separate on there. I wouldn't want to make them all green or blue or yellow. I want them all to have their own distinct color. Even down here, if I have these two lights, wherever they're at right here, all four of these lights are in the same grouping. If I want to break those apart, I'm going to right-click on the object itself. I'm going to say expand object groups. Current state to object, that's not it. That's the right one. Edit. No, object, there it is. Group, expand, delete, no. Let me see if they're connected somehow. I don't think they were. No, they're not connected. They should be able to separate. Let's go to mesh, let's go to conversion, polygroups to object. Yep, there we go. Mesh, conversion, polygroups to objects, that separates them. And so now I can leave those there. I'm actually going to pull them out. Delete that one. I have a cube. What is this cube here? I think it's my battery. Oops, I want Snap-on. Oh, that's the actual drone body. Okay, drone. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to take two of these lights, this one and the one opposite it. Nope. Last one. And I will call these red light. And these two I'll call green light. Because again, they're going to get a different material inside of KeyShot, so I'm doing that. I'm also going to pull these out of the group. Just to keep everything nice and clean, I want to make sure it's all set up nice. Okay, so there's drone body. I'm going to put a G at the end for group. And drop all these lights and stuff inside the drone body. Put the drone bubble in there. Did I texture the drone bubble yet? No, not yet. Let's do that. No, yes. Cool. All right. All right, so that's good. Let's take all these things. All the propellers will go into the drone body. The antenna will go into the drone body. And then I'm going to check the propellers to see if they're set up for animation. Whenever we animate something, we have to keep in mind how it's going to animate and make sure our pivot is in the right spot. If our pivot is off-center, our propellers will be obviously spinning off-center. If I middle-click this and go into the top view, the grouping for this should be right at the center of that. Now I don't want the propeller groups pivot there. It's fine being there. But looking at what should actually be spinning, it should only be these specific items here, right? Those are the four items that if this thing is spinning, that's what's actually spinning. The motor housing doesn't spin, the stuff inside the motor housing spins. So I'm just going to double check and make sure that my grouping is correct. There's my propellers. The propeller cap should probably be in there as well, so we'll put that inside that group. I'll check the pivot and make sure it's centered. If I zoom in, this is where all these lines intersect. It's perfectly right there, so that works. So I'll do the same thing on the other one. I'll open up prop 3. I'll drop the cap into the propellers. Open up prop 2, drop the cap into the propellers. You may have to do more work or less work depending on how your stuff was set up, but the important thing is understanding what has to be done so that it's all set up correctly, okay? All right, so now I have one group that is my entire drone. I have the antenna, which is by itself. That one doesn't have a material. Let's drop a material on that. I could assign materials later too once I get into KeyShot to individual items. This just makes our job a lot easier. I didn't use that blue yet. There we go. Cool. Oops, and I didn't assign one to the lights either. So turn that off, turn that off. And I'm just going to duplicate this one and then just make this a different color. It's close enough. Okay. So red lights will get the red light one. And green lights will get the green light one. There we go. Now I want to put a label on this as well. So I'm going to open up Photoshop. And when we did our product assignment, we laid out the UVs, we brought those into Photoshop, we put our texture exactly where we wanted it, and then we brought the texture back into Cinema. With this type of setup, it's a little bit different. Okay, no setup is always going to be like one method for every single thing. There's going to be instances where you want to use one method or another one or another one. So it's important that you see a bunch of things so that you can assess which one is going to be the best for your scenario. So I'm going to make a new document. I'm going to make it 4096 pixels by 4096. The reason for this is I want that texture to be nice and clear. If I made a 256 pixel, let's say, texture, I put it on my drone, it might look good, but then I try to render my drone out at a really big resolution. Well, now that texture is going to be stretched out. So it's always best to go with a big texture. That way, when you render stuff out, you have a lot of area that you can render it out without lowering the resolution. So I'm going to call this drone. Oops. Sarcona. Just put my name on there. That's fine. If you haven't downloaded Photoshop 2019 yet, or you have downloaded it, one of the fun features that they changed was it's automatically going to resize proportionately, where before you had to hold Shift. So if you do download it, just be aware of that. We don't need it for this assignment, but I just happened to open that one instead of 18. Cool, so that works. Let me put in a couple lines here too. So I'm going to make a new layer and again, I could design this in Illustrator if I decided I wanted to do that. There we go. There we go. So that says Sarcona. I'm just going to copy this to that side, and I will flip it horizontally. Fantastic. All right. Give myself a little bit more room. Maybe squeeze this more into the center of the screen. I'm going to turn the background off, and then I'm going to save this as. And I want to save this with transparency, so I'm going to save it as a ping. And that will allow me to basically set it on top of a material. So if my material, let's say, is metallic green or something like that, my logo will just sit right on top of that. So I'm going to drop this into my folder in 2510, inside drone, inside textures. And this will be, again, a ping. Now, if I decided I want to come back and change something, I spell my name wrong, whatever it is, I want to add more stuff to it, always save your texture with as a PSD also. That way you can come back and update it if you need to. You don't have to recreate it. All right, so I'm going to take my body here, and instead of this yellow color, I'm going to go to the textures, and I'm going to find that texture. So drone, textures, label ping. No, don't copy it. There we go. All right, so it places it here. It's like on everything basically inside my scene. This is not what I want it to look like, obviously. I want it to be in a specific spot. So I'm going to go to my UVs. And this is obviously we're doing the UVs after the fact, after I've brought in the image. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go to my drone body. I'm going to grab all my UVs. So the same process we did before. I make sure that tolerant is on, only visible is off, grab everything. And I'm just going to go to the transform and set the scale to 0 and 0. And what that does, it shrinks all my UVs to one spot. And then I'm just going to move this over to like the corner. Okay? This just gets it out of the way. Basically now, there's none of that image on here. Now I can place exactly where I want that texture to go. So I'm going to grab my texture placer. Let's say that I wanted this to be on the underside here, right there. Actually, no, I'm going to put it on top. I want to put it on top because we're going to see the top. We're not really going to see the bottom. And that's the battery side. I don't want that. I want the good side here. So I'm selecting a portion of faces where I want my label to go. Keep in mind the proportions of this, how wide it is, how tall it is. If I were to only grab like these few in the middle, that texture would look ridiculous, kind of squished into there. So I want to make sure I have enough room, obviously, that it fits that stuff. So I'm going to aim my camera pretty close to this, like that. I'm looking pretty much dead on. I'm going to go to projection, and I'm going to say frontal. And what that does is it projects that texture straight through the camera onto that. Now you'll notice that it has these faces here, but it also has these other faces. If I zoom around, you'll see that I accidentally selected the back because I had down here, only visible is still off. So it's basically selecting straight through and grabbing stuff on that bottom piece. So if I just hit undo, I just go turn that off. I switch this back to my regular one. I hold Control and I deselect that. All right, let me turn that back on just so I can deselect all those in there. There we go. I'll turn it back on. Those are still selected. I get really close to that. There we go. Frontal again. Perfect. So still grab some other ones. It's not a huge deal. Let me go to the Move tool. Let me double click this and just move it out of the way. And then I'll grab these guys, shrink them down, and move them over here. They just have to be out of the way of where my texture is. Then I can move this down, and I just double click it to select the whole thing, and then scale it up. Move it down. There we go. Now I think it's best if you look at the texture as you're doing it because it's actually going to move opposite. As I move the UVs up, the texture label is going to go down, okay? Because basically I'm taking where that texture is, instead of being here, it's going to be in a different spot. So I'm moving where it is on this. Just have to get used to it. Okay, there we go, like that. Cool. So now I have my label on there, and if I want it on somewhere else, I could do the same thing. I could select these faces, do a frontal on it, and move those faces in that same exact area, okay? If I decided to add something else to this, let's say I had some stripes that I wanted to add to it, I'll go here, I'll pick a color. Oops, make sure I make a new layer. There we go. I'll save this. I hit something. There we go. Save it as my regular label, yes. And then I'll save this as, again, a ping. So I get that transparency. Yes. Cool. I'll update the texture on this, so I switch back to my startup. Click that, reload, should get the stripes, yes. Back to my UVs. And let's say that I wanted the stripes to be like right there. So I'm going to grab those faces here. And I think I can do an edge loop. There we go. I'll do them one at a time, but the process is going to be pretty similar. Cool. So I go to this spot, I go to projection. I could do other ones. I don't have to do frontal. I could do cylinder, I could do flat, I could do cubic, whatever. But frontal, it's going to shoot it like straight through. So here's that cylinder, here's all those faces straight projected. And then I could just move, come on, make sure I'm on the right one. There we go. Move this down to the stripe area and then rotate it. And then move it down, there we go. And so now these stripes will run right down through the middle of that, okay? So I could do the same thing on this one, that one, and the other one. It's literally the same process, just moving those over. Just make sure if you do something like that, that you're selecting the correct things. So when I go over here, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's that one, right? So I want to make sure that I select that same loop. Faces, yes. Select loop. I always like to double check just to make sure I didn't screw something up, because sometimes I do. I can't even see it in that one. Guess I'll have to rely on this one here. Let me double check. So 1, 2, 3. Let's see, I did mess it up. That's 1, 2, should be this one. There we go. And again, I go to like this top view. I go to, let's say, frontal. I move this down, switch back to these, move that down. Now that I have one there, it's going to be a lot easier. I can just basically rotate this into the same position. Even shrink it if I need to get it to be the right size. And there we go. Okay, cool. Oops. Standard. Okay, so that's how you would do any of the texturing that you're going to add inside there. And there's my stripes. All right, so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to animate it. So this will be a 6-second animation. So if we do the math, 6 times 30 is what number? 180, yep, so 180. You could do it a little bit longer if you wanted to. It really doesn't need to be that big, but 6 seconds is a good amount of time. So what we should have is the drone is sitting on the ground, the propellers kick up, and then the whole thing takes off, right? So in Cinema, we're going to animate the drone's body. So for, let's say, 2.5 seconds, so about 70 frames or so, it's literally just doing nothing. It's just sitting on the ground. So I'm going to go to my drone body. I'm going to hit P, 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 R, 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 okay? No keyframes are right there. And then I'm going to scoot up to 180. And I'm going to lift this up. And maybe scoot it over. And I will set keyframes again for these, set keyframes again for those. Now, when we set keyframes like this, we get a little indicator that says you have keyframes on this. We can go, let's say, in the middle now, and let me just scoot this over. Actually, I'm going to go to, like, let's say 110. That's a good number. I'm going to take this and scoot it pretty much straight over, and then pull it up. And then set some more keyframes here, some more keyframes there. Now the reason for this is a drone doesn't just pick up off the ground and just start going over to the right. Typically it picks up straight, it's like a little wobbly as it goes, and then it takes off. So that's what we're doing. We're kind of going straight, and then it's going to take off. The more dots you have, the slower it's going to go, the more frames it's going to take. So here you can see the dots right there, how many dots we have versus that one. So I'm going to go to this end one here, and I think I'm going to pull this maybe a little bit further this way, just so that I have more evenly spaced dots. I think also I'm going to click on this keyframe. Let me deselect and then select it again. Come on. I'll just right click on it, I guess. It's not showing me the thing. And I hit linear. I'm going to click on this keyframe and say spline. There we go. So what this should do is it should create a nice transition here. Now, it still looks like it's slowing down. I'll fix that after. Oh, there it is. I can click on this and say linear. Nope, it still doesn't want to do it. All right. I just don't like how many points are right here. It looks like it's slowing down for some reason, but I'll fix it. All right, so as it comes up, like we said, it should kind of like wobble a little bit. So I've set my major keyframes, 70, 110, and 180. Now I'm going to go into the middle here and just give it a little bit of a rocking motion. So something like this. No position keyframes, just rotates. So I'm going to set some rotate keyframes. I'm going to go to 110, let's say, give it a little bit of rotation maybe this way. Let's go to 130. The drone's flying that way, so I'm going to tilt it that way. And I think I'll just tilt it maybe a little back this way. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to preview this and just see if it looks like what I want. So the drone doesn't do anything, kicks up. There we go. All right, so that looks like it's pretty good. All right, it's a little bit slow. I'm going to definitely fix that, okay? So this gives me just my keyframes. I'm going to edit how they go from one to the other. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to my animation on any one of those pieces and go to show the F-curve. So this is going to show how each one of these keyframes are moving, how each piece is moving. If I go to the position X, this is it moving front and back. There's no movement in it, so it's zeroed. If I go to the Y, you can see there's definitely some movement here. That's it lifting off the ground. Here's the Z, so that's it moving to the right. And then here's my rotations. So let's go to the Y first. So I like this. It's kind of picking up speed, so it's like slowly lifting off the ground. That's what that means right here. And then it's going at a pretty constant height, and then it scoots over. Now over here, I don't like that it's kind of leveling off. When this gets flatter, that means that it's slowing down. I don't want the drone to seem like it's going up and then just like slowing down for some reason. So I'm going to take this handle and just move it so that it's straight like that. I'm also going to take this handle and maybe just pull it in a little bit more of an alignment downward like that. Okay, this looks like a nicer line. If it's too drastic like this, you might get some weird stuff happening. So I'm going to keep it somewhat in that line. I'm going to go to the position Z. I'm going to do the same thing here with that end one, is just take that and make it linear. So it's just straight up. I'm also going to take this one and maybe just move it up a little bit. There you go, like that. And then here's my rotates. If I need to frame them, I can just say frame all. Okay, a little wobbly rotation, that's fine. Let's go to this one, frame all. That's fine. And this one should be the same thing. Yep, that's fine. Okay. So now let's rewind it and hit play again. Maybe a little too much rotation in there. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to our keyframes here, here, here. There. I think I'm going to remove some of these rotations. I think it might be just too much rotation on this. Let's go to that one. Oops, I just deleted the whole curve there. I don't want to do that. There we go. All right, so now let's see what that looks like. Oh, now that looks really weird. All right, let's go back to the end. I'll rotate this over like this. I'm going to add a little bit more rotation here, I think. It just needs a little bit more. Oops. That was the wrong spot. I'm going to go here and add rotation that way. Comes up. Yep. And then right at the end, let me fix that. So see, it's just a matter of tweaking these to get it to look right. That's too much tweaking that way. Let's go this way. That comes that way. I think I'm going to rotate it just a little bit this way. There we go. All right, that feels better. All right, cool. So if I were to save this now and I took this, let's say, into KeyShot, KeyShot will read all the geometry that I have. It'll read all my keyframes that I have. But KeyShot will do what it thinks it wants to do for each one of these keyframes. If I set a keyframe here and I set a keyframe there, Cinema is going to interpret it one way, KeyShot's going to interpret it one way of how to get from keyframe to keyframe. So I want to eliminate any guessing that they have. So any of this stuff that I just did in the F-curve where I tweaked how these graphs are being laid out, KeyShot will try to read what those things are doing. So I want to basically lock it in so it doesn't do any of that stuff. I'm also going to go to the very beginning of this and set keyframes for all of these things. So now I'm going to do what's called baking. I'm going to go to the very beginning of my animation, or my stuff here. I'm going to grab all my keyframes. I'm going to say function bake curves. There it is, bake object. And what this is going to do is it's going to take every single one of these things and it's going to lock it in so that there's no guessing. Frame 1 it's here, frame 2 it's here, frame 3 it's there. You would do the same type of thing if you were to take it again from one program to another. They may interpret those keyframes different. Okay, we want to eliminate all that. Oops, before I do that, let me just save it. In case I decide I want to come back and change stuff, I want to have a spot to do that. So I change it, I save it so I can do that. Then I go back to my F-curves. Make sure everything is selected. Yes. I go back to bake. I say bake all my stuff from 0 to 180, yes. I don't have any expressions, that's fine. I don't need to create a copy, I can just do it right here. Cleaning tracks, sure. All parameters, fine. So now it's going to go literally every frame and set keyframes for the entire object. It's literally like we went to frame 1 and set keyframes for all those things. Go to frame 2, do it again. 3, do it again. 4, do it again. So you end up with something like this, which is not very editable, like literally keyframes on every single frame. But it's very friendly when we go to another software package. It remembers all of our stuff. So I'm going to do save as. I'm going to say Sarcona drone ready for KeyShot. And then, of course, we open up KeyShot. If you download KeyShot, typically there's a watermark. If you don't download it, then you won't have a watermark. Just so you can see, here's another thing that was done in KeyShot. Your stuff, like, it's amazing what the software can do. It's just like very quick and very intuitive once you understand the basics of it. So there's something, it's a bunch of simple shapes just dropped on top of another object. There's some other stuff that's a little bit more modeling to it, but for the most part, it's pretty simple. All right, so I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Import, and I'm going to go find my stuff. P drive 10, drone, scenes. Nope, that's because I saved it into my last year's folder. Ready for KeyShot, 1126, yes. So I'm going to say snap to ground, yes. That's fine, that's fine. Yep, everything else should be good. Something important to notice also is the up orientation is still Y. Some softwares, the up orientation is Z. So up is Z. In our software that we're using, typically it's Y. So what this should do is it should bring in all of our stuff. Our first job is to make sure that everything is there and everything is as smooth as we want it to be. If it's not there and it's not as smooth as we want it to be, we need to fix it because we will run into issues later on that we don't want to have to backtrack on. So the navigation for this, the left mouse, only left mouse, is to tumble. The middle mouse is to track. And the scroll wheel is to zoom in and out, or Alt, right mouse button, is to zoom in and out. Okay? So however you want to spin those things around. Here's my little bands. You'll see my name doesn't look like it's on there, but it is. It's just invisible because it's black and the texture's black. Everything looks like it's there. I see, you know, my motor, my housing, my antenna's there, my lights are underneath. All right, so everything looks like it's there. Let's check the animation. So I go to animation. It's a little condensed on my screen, but here's all my stuff. If I zoom out, oops, make sure I remember the hotkeys, there we go. And I click and drag, I should see nothing for about 2 seconds, and then it lifts off. And I can zoom out if I somehow lose my other second there. Oh, you're so close, there you go. Okay, so my animation is there, it looks the same way. I can hit play just to verify again that it's there. If something wasn't right, I jump back to Cinema, I fix whatever's not right, I investigate, figure out what's not showing up, re-import it into KeyShot, okay? So you want to make sure that whatever you're bringing in, that's your version that you have. If I want to add something, I want to add it in Cinema before I bring it into here, okay? So that all looks like it's working good. Let me rewind this to the beginning. Let me turn this off, and let me zoom back in. On the left, this is all of our library stuff. So this is all the stuff we're going to pull from to assign materials. On the right here, this is our scene. So this is all the stuff we currently have. For whatever reason, my window is shorter than it should be. But I guess we'll just deal with that. It's weird. I'm missing a bar on the bottom. This is my model. So this is my everything inside my scene. There's my drone ready for KeyShot file. If I open this, there's the drone body. If I open this, here's the animation. Close that. Here's the animation for it. Here's all the individual pieces. And then again, if I open those, I can see the individual propeller instance, propellers, propeller rod. Okay, all the way down to the very nitty-gritty stuff. I don't see the propeller rod, so I didn't assign it a material. So now on this side, I'm going to find a material that I want for those pieces. So I'm going to go to the propellers, and I'm going to say, okay, I want a white material. So if I type in white, it'll pull up anything that's white. Maybe I'd want to narrow it down more. Let's say plastic. There we go. So here's plastic, and I can type in white, and it'll pull up anything that's white and plastic. You can also go through the list and find specific things here as well. Here's a hard texture. So I'm going to drag this onto one of the propellers. Because they all have that same color on them, you'll see how it assigns it to all the propellers at the same time. Okay? If I didn't, I would have to go through and manually pick each propeller and manually drop this material on each one of those. Huge hassle. All right, so that's them. Let's go to nickel. Oops, spell it correctly. There we go. And I'm going to use brushed nickel for these motor housings. So I'm going to go to brushed nickel, drag this onto that. All right, I can zoom in too if I need to, get a closer look at what it looks like. All right, that's cool. I'm going to go to car paint. Here's a couple car paints. I'm going to drag this onto the tips. And I'm not worried about colors right now either. I'm just kind of assigning whatever. And then I will assign another paint. I like these ones here, these metal paints. I'm going to assign another paint to this. Okay. For the bubble there, let's do glass with only 2 S's. Drop that on there. And then for the antenna, I'll use like black rubber material or something. Or I will just look up rubber and then that will come up. There we go. You're so close, just get right there. There we go. Let me scoot underneath. I still have my lights that I have to do. If I go here to lights, it'll actually bring up lights and I can assign those to it. And they'll light up. I may want to not do that. I may want to just, let's see, assign one of these emissives to it, which will just make that material emit light. Let's see, it says emissive warm, emissive neutral, emissive cool. I'll drag it on there and we'll see. Okay, so I'm dragging one on each one of these lights, and it's going to say, do you want to link them because it's the same material? I'm going to say no. Because I want 2 different materials for it. All right, cool. So now there's all my stuff. I think that's everything. Yes, yes. Okay. So now let's go and edit it. So the editing part is pretty simple. You just double click on any object, it'll bring up the material over here, and then you can tweak what it looks like. If I don't want the color to be white, I can click on it and make it red. That quick. So let's say I go with like a gray. That might look cool. Let's go to the body and double click that. Let's go to the base color. Some of these will have more or less properties depending on what you pick. So just so you can see, for this one there's diffuse, specular, roughness, and refractive index. For the metallic paint, there's base color, metal coverage, metal roughness, clear coat, and so on. The way that this program works is it's so quick. Change stuff, see what happens, okay? I could go through every single one of these, but you wouldn't remember it all. So let's say I wanted this to be blue instead, so I'm going to go to, let's say, blue here. That's not blue. There we go. And I'll go here. I'm going to slide this over to the blue. I'm going to go here and just slide this over to the blue. Oops, and there's blue. Okay? And then let's say that I wanted the metal coverage, maybe I want to adjust it some. So now this is less metal. You may have to get close to actually see the change there. Or more metal. You can really see the speckles kind of kicking up on that. Same thing with the clear coat. If I take this clear coat refractive index up, I'm going to get more reflection in here versus this one, I'm getting kind of less reflection. Okay, so again, something to kind of play with. If I go to this bubble and I take the roughness up, that will make the glass not so transparent. It'll kind of fog it in there. I may not want to see what's inside here. I'm like, oh, I don't really model anything that looks kind of silly being like that, but if I do that, then you can't really notice it. Even if it's just a little bit, you can't really notice something in there. It's just kind of like a bubble. Okay, now I need to get my texture on this, so I'm going to double click. You can come in. I'm going to go to my tab here. There's a properties, which is where we currently were. There's a textures. If I'm bringing in a full-blown texture and dropping it over the entire thing, that's where I would put that. Or if I'm going to go and put something on top of it, I would go to label. And if I go to add label to texture, I go and I find my stuff here, here, there. So many different folders. Drone. Oops, that was last semester's. Textures, there we go. There's my label. And you'll see that it just brings it in and kind of arbitrarily places it how it feels that it should be placed, which is just like this. That's not how I want it. So I'm going to come down here to mapping type and change it to UV. Then it should read the UVs from the other program and put them in the right spot. It doesn't always do that. So you'll see my Sarcona is actually like wrapped around here and my stripes are right there. So it's weird how it does that. But then I just have to adjust some of these settings here. So let's see, flip horizontal, no, oops, flip vertical, there we go. So if I go here to flip vertical, that will flip the texture around. So what's happening is it's actually reading my material like upside down, or my UVs upside down. So flipping them puts them in the right direction, okay? So I just say flip vertical, my textures are now in the correct spot. There's where I wanted that. Here's where I wanted those bands to be. Now let's pretend that I wanted the bands on the other arm too. Well, I'd have to go back into Cinema, relay out those other bands, and then bring the whole model back into Cinema at this point. In this case, I'm not going to do that, but that's what I would have to do. So that's why you want to make sure all your stuff is set up there so that you can get it in the right spot. Now you can also lay out materials or labels inside here. Let me go and add a label to this. So I'm going to add another one. And this one, I'm going to go back to here. So many folders. No. Maybe it's there. And MCC, logo designs, that's where it's at. There it is. Okay. So now this is another logo. This is the MCC logo. So let's say I want to put that on my ship here. This one I can place different. So this one I can use a planer to project it, while the other one is using the UVs. So I'm going to take this, and this is what's also neat about this. Oops, move that over. Once I go to the move texture, I simply click where I want it to be, and then it jumps right there. So if I wanted this to be here, it'll jump there. If I wanted it here, it'll jump there. So I can click it, and then I can go down to the width and height and shrink it down so that it fits perfectly on there. Oops. So you have to remember that you have that on so that you can zoom in correctly. And then I can shrink it and then reposition it. Oops. They're so close. There we go. And then I just hit the checkbox when I'm done. Maybe I'll adjust it just a hair just by going to the... My window is so tiny I can't even see it. Height, width, yes, move texture, there it is. And just nudge that down just a bit. Cool. Okay. So now it's textured, it's done. Okay, if I want to tweak it, definitely tweak it. I can still double click this, I can still change my colors. Right? Whatever I want to do, I can still adjust those things. Don't go crazy on the colors. This isn't a first grade coloring contest. Pick colors that go together. Pick colors that work. These colors work pretty well. There's red here, there's red here, there's red there. There's this like bluish purplish dark gray color that's right there. This is also like a gray. This is a silver. So these colors work together. All right. So now we have the materials there. If I wanted to double check, I can go to animation, close that. I can click and drag and verify, yes, everything does move with it. You'll even see that the logo that we attach to it still moves. So if you forgot to put a logo on your stuff, you can always attach it to a label and drop it on somewhere else too if you want to do that. Okay, everything still moves with it. Wonderful. I will warn you though, it'll do this. See the MCC logo's on the back side now. It projects it straight through. So I forgot I have to change that, so let me double click. Let me go to labels, let me go to MCC. This is like my one gripe about this software is that I have no window space. There we go. I'm going to change the depth of this. By changing the depth, my projection is right here. How far out from my projection, that's where that label is going to be. So if I shrink it, obviously it won't do that. Okay, if I set this to 30, nope, still not there. If I set it to 50, 60, 150, well, it's getting close. There it is, 255. That's how big that is. Okay, if I set it to 10, it projects right there, doesn't go through. Okay, you can also set this for not two-sided. That's another way I could have gotten rid of that. And that way it only projects on the front face, it won't project on the back. I had a project I was working on. I had basically like, let's say, come on. Let's say I have this box here and I want to project just this texture on there. It's fine if I project it here and it stays right on this face and it doesn't go through here. Two-sided would correct that. But let's say that I projected this UPC on here. It would work here projecting. It wouldn't project on the inside of that face, the same side, but it would project on this one because it's still facing the same direction. So sometimes you need to kind of work around it by doing UVs, doing the two-sided, doing the depth, whatever. Cool. So that's all set up. Let's look at the animation now. So like I said, I wanted the propellers to kick up and start spinning. So I'm going to zoom out, spin around a little bit. Let me see which propeller I'm at. So this is propeller 4. Of course, you're on that side. Let's go over there. Okay. So I'm going to go to propeller 4. Remember, I have the group inside here, which is the propeller itself. That's what should be spinning. I right-click. I go to animation. This software doesn't have keyframes, like go here, then go here, then go there. This software is basically, I want to animate this thing rotating. How long do you want it to rotate and how far do you want it to go? Okay. So I'm going to say I want to animate the rotation. It pops open this window that says, here's the properties for it. It pops open the timeline. Oh my gosh, everything is so condensed. There we go. Okay, so here's my propeller rotation. That green bar, that's how long it's going to rotate. So you'll see it rotates for 1 second. I want them to stay rotated the entire time. So I'm just going to drag the bar to 6 seconds. let me throw this on the other screen. Oops. I'm going to click and drag inside the timeline just so I can watch it. And you'll see that it rotates like this, right? Like that's obviously not the direction I want it to go. So I'm going to switch axes. I'll say, let's say the Y direction. And that will click and drag again. All right, so it's definitely rotating. I need more rotations here, so let's say maybe 100, or not 100. Let's say 6,000. Okay, so now it's rotating. Now this is what I was talking about before, making sure our pivot's in the correct spot. You'll see that this is definitely not in the correct spot. This is rotating like, I don't know, where the axis is it thinks it is. So I'm going to say pivot point object. Let's try that one. Nope, that didn't work. Oh, axis orientation, original local. That should work. Nope. And this is just one of those things that happens when you do this. Reset. I need that. All right, so I'm going to pick an item inside here, and that's what will be my pivot point. So if I open up prop 4, open up this, open up my propellers, that cap should be perfectly centered, right? The reason that it's doing that with this one specifically is there's 3 propellers. So the center point is actually kind of like off center. It's not perfect. So that's why it's going off. If I do it to this item, that item should be a perfectly centered item. We will see if it works. Haha, success. Okay, perfect. So now that's perfect. I'm going to add maybe 12,000 rotations to this. We want this to seem like it's rotating fast, so we need a lot of rotations for that to happen. If we don't have a lot of rotations, then it just will look silly. There we go. All right, so 12,000 should be good. I'm going to zoom out a bit. We'll close this. I'll hit the play button so we can see lots of spins, and then it goes off. Cool. Now I want, let me go back to this. I'm going to double click this rotation. That brings up my properties for it. Make this bigger. I want the start of this to ease. So it's going to ease into the animation. Okay, so I just set the start of that to ease in. All right, now here's what's also cool about this. Once I have an animation, I can copy this animation and I can paste it to other objects and they'll have the same exact settings. Okay, so I'm going to go to prop 3, open this up, right click on propellers, and then under animation, paste the animation. And then you'll see, there it is. And we'll close that for a second. Let's go to prop 2, propellers, animation, paste. Prop 1, propellers, animation, paste. Okay. I'll hit rewind, I'll hit play, we'll see what it looks like. Woo! So, what do we think is wrong? Yep. So you got to make sure that they're all set on the right one. So this is number 2. Which one is this? Yep, 2. Then I just have to make sure that number 2 is also set to its prop cap. And then I'll go to number 3. And number 4. Cool. Whoa, that's still not working. Hold on. 6, prop cap, center, origin. What was that? Well, the origin will be the origin of the whole world, so it'll spin around that. Oh, I think I still have that pivot point object on. No, I think I want that on. I don't want that on. Yes. Let's hit play again. No. weird. Typically that doesn't happen, but whatever, we'll deal with it. Nope. All right, so let's rewind it. Let's close this out and delete these. And then we will just go into each one of these and just set it up individually. So propellers, yes. Animation, rotation. This is propeller rotation 5. Oh, that's what I did. So I just connected them to the wrong pieces, that's it. So I was going based off this number, that's not the number there. I don't know why I picked that. I'm going to go here. This is propeller 4, propeller 4. So if I go to the prop cap, I want to make sure I pick propeller 4's prop cap. And then when I come into 3, make sure it's on 3, yes. There we go. So I just put them on the wrong one, so they were rotating with something totally different. And this one should be 1. Let's try it again. Much better. Cool. All right, so now let's look at this and make sure that it makes sense, right? So as these things spin, if this spins counterclockwise, it's going to push it down. If it spins clockwise, it should lift it up off the ground. Okay, so if it goes that way. So let's watch and make sure it spins the correct direction. Nope, that one's spinning backwards. Now remember I offset them so that these are actually opposite. So this is going a different direction. So these two in the corner will spin the current direction. These two will spin the opposite. So I'm going to double click this one and just put a negative. Go to that one, put a negative. There we go. And so now they're spinning opposite directions. It's a subtle thing, but it definitely makes it, will make it look cool. And then that's it for my animation. Okay. Now we're going to do two different things when we turn this in. We're going to have a movie that we render out, and we'll have a still image that we turn in as well. So I'm going to adjust the environment. There we go. So I'm going to drop in a different environment. I want you to have like a scene for your animation, and then I want you to have a studio for your still image. Okay. So inside here, if I go to interiors, these are all different interior environments. If I go to outdoor, these are all outdoor environments. Don't use the sun or sky ones. Those are very dark. You wouldn't want to use those. So either one of these, you just go through and you pick one of them and drop it in. And then it'll appear that your drone is there. Okay. You may need to adjust its positions and stuff, but for the most part, it'll be pretty close. Obviously, this doesn't work because it's in the bathroom. That looks weird. Let's drop this in. The kitchen. I actually like this stairwell, works good. Or one of these dirt lots. You can go over here to the environment tab and you can adjust what the environment is looking like or where it is. If I need to adjust the height of it, you can see how I can move the height of this up or down. And that will make it appear that it's, sitting there. You'll notice that it's not going to look like it's photorealistic as far as, as I move the camera around. So we won't be moving the camera for our animation. The camera will be static. That looks pretty good like that. If I start doing this, it's going to look very fake. So we won't be animating the camera in this instance. You can also rotate the environment. So if you want to pick a different spot, like in this case, I want to show off my logo, which I may want to jump back into Photoshop and change the color of. Let's do that real quick. I'm going to grab this, just invert that, and I will make this text white. Just reload that label and then it should be good. Better. And I can do the same thing with the MCC one, but for now it's good. Okay. So I want to do it from this side because I want to see that label, so I may need to adjust the environment so I'm getting the best lighting on that side. Notice the shadow doesn't update until I let go, and then the shadow will update. Okay, so something like that is probably good. Oh, I need to adjust my lights down there. Let me go to my scene. Let me go to my emissives, which are right here. And I'm going to pull the intensity down some. Just zoom in on that so I can see it. There it is. And I'll color this one red. Go to that one, color it green. Okay, so there's my lights. All right, I'll go back to that. Okay, cool. So that works. I may not want a ground shadow. In this case, I do because it makes it look more grounded. I think that looks good too. Having this occlusion ground shadow, I think, is going to be look better than just the plain one. That looks pretty ugly. That looks pretty nice. I don't need ground reflections in this case because it's sand, so that would make sense. And I don't want to flatten the ground because it'll do that. Okay. You could play with it too. You may have different settings that look better, but for the most part, I think that's pretty good. More adjustments here you could do if you wanted to brighten it or darken it. You can do that as well. Right now we don't have our other settings up. That's fine. We'll adjust that later. For our movie, we'll be rendering it at 960 by 540. So I'm going to go to my images here, and I need to set my resolution to 960 by 540. Oops. Let me scoot that over. Let me adjust this. Again, one of the things I hate about the software is one of these features. Oops, I just opened another version of it. I didn't want that. Close. Toolbar, ribbon, yes, enable docking. Come on. So I need to, there it is, exit full screen. That's what I was in, or presentation mode. There it is. You shouldn't have that problem on yours, but mine, it maximized it too much, and I couldn't get this back to this. So when I type in this resolution here, it fits it to my screen, okay? So as I start adjusting my stuff, I can't just type in 960 by 540. You saw what happened. It went bigger than my screen and didn't match up, okay? So I have to go to some resolution that still is the same proportions as 960 by 540. So if you need a calculator, you can pull it out, but if you just do like half of what you think you need, 480, and then this will be 270, so I'll have to hit the unlink off, hit the unlock off to 270. There we go. So this is the same proportions as 960 by 540, okay? And then I can hit the link and the lock. Now when I make this bigger, now it'll keep that proportion. If I uncheck those things, it'll resize it to whatever my window is. It's nice while you're working, but when you go to render, we need to know exactly what's going to show up. When I go to my animation now, and I play this, watch what happens, it just goes right out of frame. So I need to see that. Before I wasn't seeing that. Before it would go right to the top and it worked. So now I need to be able to see this so I can zoom out. And let me just zoom out a little bit further. It can go right out at the end, but you really want to make sure it's in there for the most part. So it may have to be like right there. Yep, like that's fine. See how it goes right at the end, it's like off screen. Okay, or you can have it fly into the screen. Right. I don't know what that one's doing. I'll have to figure that out. It's like one weird one just kind of floating somewhere. All right, I gotta figure that out right now because that's gonna bother me. Why are you doing that? Double click the part, it goes here, I double click this. This is propeller 3. Come on, where are your properties at? Oh, there they are. Let's pick. Oh, dynamic. That's one. I have dynamic still on. That's why. Oops. This. All right. So now if I watch the animation, oh my gosh. Good. Okay. So then I'm going to go and set this up to actually render out. I'm going to save, which I haven't done at all. Sarcona drone anim. And then I'm going to go to my lighting, and I'm going to turn my stuff on. So up till now, we've been working with this basic mode, where the lighting and the textures and everything that's calculating is very basic, which allows us to work pretty quick. So I'm going to switch it to product, which then turns on self-shadowing, it turns on global illumination, and it turns on ground illumination. So all three of these will help give it a cleaner render, okay? I'm going to go to my render here. I'm going to go to animation. I'm going to turn off video. I'm going to set this to 960 by 540. You'll see that it automatically changes. I want frames output. I want this to say Sarcona _ drone anim. That's fine. EXRs, actually I'll save it as TIFFs. That'll be good. And then everything else is, you can leave it as is there. I'm going to go to the options here, and I'm going to pull the samples up. Typically, if you go to like, depending on what kind of materials you have, if you go to 70, it's a pretty good number to go by. If you go higher, like 120 or 200, you're just wasting your time. Now, if I were to hit render right here, render in background, it'll start rendering, but I won't have an animation that looks as good as it can. Notice when I hit play and I stop it, the propellers are basically frozen in space. They shouldn't. We should have motion blur on them as they're spinning around. For whatever reason, they moved that under the render menu. We have to do that one. And so now we should see the blades are actually like blurry. That's what we want. Cool. So now that that's set up, I'll say render in background. And then so what this does is it brings open another window, and it'll just render frame by frame, one at a time, until it's done. You can see the progress at the top, 1 out of 181, 2 out of 181. As you're watching it, you can see the samples down here at the bottom. So there's 49, 53, 61, 65, whatever. If you look at this and you say, wow, it's finishing, but it still looks grainy, or it still looks kind of ugly looking, stop the rendering. Go into your samples and make more samples. If you have something that's really chromy or really reflective or a lot of glass material, you may need more samples in order for it not to be grainy, okay? And then you just render in background again. And then it'll pop open a new window. There it is. And it'll take a little bit longer, but the rendering will look a lot nicer because you have more samples. Now, it'll show you this took 11 seconds, 12 seconds, 13 seconds, about 14 seconds a frame, right? So if I go 14 seconds a frame times 180 frames, this will take about 42 minutes to render, okay? So I can kind of figure that out. So you'll render that out, you'll make it into a movie just like we've done in previous assignments when we made stuff into movies. For your still, I'm going to save this as a still. And you want to do this as 2 separate files. If you have to come back and change the animation, you don't want to have to redo everything that you've already done. So for the still, we want to find a cool angle for our drone. Okay, if I go here, the whole drone is going to be motion blurred because it's moving up. So typically you don't want to move it up and have that. You want to get your still within the first 2 seconds or so as it's still on the ground. That way the drone is perfectly clear, but the propellers themselves are blurry. That's typically a good shot. For this one, you're going to do a studio, so you'll go to the studio ones, and you'll drop in a studio. Okay, I'm going to make my screen a bit bigger. I'm going to turn off the animation because I'm done with that. I'm going to go to my image, And I'm just going to make this, let's say, 600 for now. I'd probably go to 700. Yep. Okay. All right, so this is going, it's calculating stuff. You can see how slow this is already processing. Because I still have these other things on, it's going to take a little bit more time. It's fine, I can let it do it. It's not going to hurt me at all. But what I'm looking for here is just the coloring on the drone. I'm ignoring the background. Don't worry about what the background looks like. I'm just looking to make sure the drone's coloring looks nice. If you looked at a car rendering, yes, I know. I will update you eventually. In a studio. There you go. If you look at this, you can see they have intentionally put highlights in certain areas because they want you to see the flow of the car. Certain areas are really dark, certain areas are bright. There's a lot of contrast, nice coloring. Same thing here. If we were to pick one of these at random and just kind of said, I guess I'm just going to use that, it may not show the drone off as good as we could otherwise. Like right there, we kind of lost a lot of detail because we don't have as much light coming into this. Even on some of these that are maybe a little bit too soft, you may get some weird coloring on your drone that you may not want on there. So as easy as this is just to go through and try to pick one that makes it look pretty decent, do that. Okay, like that one, I don't like this because it's like too much lines. I think the one I actually had up here, these panel ones are pretty decent. I like that. All right, so I'm going to use one of these 3 panel ones. Now you could also, just for future reference, you don't have to do it for this one, if I go to that environment, here's those same settings. So I could adjust again the brightness. I could adjust the contrast. So if I'm trying to maybe make the scene a little bit darker on the drone itself, I could do that. I could change the size, the height, rotation, blah, blah, blah. We're going to play with this background area in a second. But I can also go to the HDR editor, and all of these things here are different lights that it's created. So if I were to, let's say, click on this one, and I scroll down, I can change the brightness of that specific one. So maybe I want a little bit more punch on that side of it. Maybe on this one, let's see what that one's doing. So that's 1.5. And then let's see what this one's doing. There. So it might look cool if I did something like that. It doesn't. I don't like it like that. But it might, right? Depending on what we have, what item we're kind of shaping out here. You could also move these. So if I want to adjust where this light was coming in, I could do that as well. If I want to adjust the size of it, I could adjust the size too. Okay? It's important to see these things because at some point you may be doing this kind of stuff. This is someone's job at a company to do lighting for this. Here's a different color. Maybe we want to add a splash of orange in there. Maybe I want to add a new light. Let's go here. One of these buttons is new light. I think it's that one, yes. I click on where I want that light to show up, which is kind of cool. Like I want this to be lit up. And it automatically will add a light in that HDR of where that needs to be in order for that to happen. And then I'm just going to take this one and give it that orangey color. And let's take the brightness up. Add image or gradient. Cool. So if you want to get rid of it, you can just right click and delete. But I wanted you to see that. Now, I said to pay attention to the drone's coloring and not the background because I don't want the background there. I want basically just a flat color. And I can pick what color I want. So maybe a gray would be good. I can also go into the camera settings. I'm going to go to depth of field. I'm going to change my focal length a bit. That might be good there. There we go. So it gives it a little bit more depth that way. And I'm going to hit select focal point and say I want this to be in focus. And then I can adjust the f-stops to create more blur or less blur. There we go. So now you can see how this is all blurry That's in focus there. And then the same thing over this side, okay? Now these numbers are relevant to my scene. They are not relevant to your scene. Yours are going to be different numbers, so you just have to find numbers that work. I'm also going to go to the image, and I'm just going to add a vignette to this. That's cool. I like the way that looks. Maybe a little bit more strength on there. Maybe go back to the environment and make this a little bit lighter so that's a little bit more apparent. Yes, good. Okay, now this image, when we render it out, will be 3,000 by 2,400, 3,000 wide by 2,400 tall. Again, I'm not going to be able to type in 3,000 here, so I have to find something that works. Half of it isn't going to work. So if I just did 300 by 240 or 600 by 480, that should work. So let me unlock, yes, and then lock these again. Zoom out a smidge. And then when I go to render, I go to my output, I say still image, and I call this Sarcona_drone rendering. And I just make sure that it's inside of my folder. Default, it drops it on the documents folder somewhere. Final. 3,000 pixels by 2,400 pixels. There we go. And then I would hit again, render in background. And again, you may have to adjust those samples. You may have to increase them some. Just render it out and you'll see. Another thing you may want to do, in some cases, you may want to have a floor that is reflective. You've seen those before. If I go to Edit, Add Geometry, you can do a backdrop ramp, which is kind of neat. Backdrop round, which is kind of neat. And then you can also do just ground plane. And I just go back to my materials. I go back to, let's say, nickel. And I'll just drop this nickel material on here. Do you want to link these? No, I don't. Oh, you've stopped working. Well, we'll be done with it anyway. But I would adjust the properties just like I would any other one. I just change the roughness, and the rougher it is, the softer that reflection is going to be. The harder it is, the harder that reflection is going to be, or less roughness. Okay? So you can create some very cool things by doing stuff in KeyShot. There's jobs out there that are just KeyShot stuff. There are jobs that are these, where you go through and you get geometry. Let's say you have a car model. They bring it in from CAD. They bring it into Cinema or Maya. They clean up all the geometry, make sure everything's organized, make sure everything's labeled and colored. Then they bring that into KeyShot, and then they go through and texture it and light it and make it look realistic. Okay? So when you're done with this, you should have your KeyShot file, your Cinema file, your movie, and your image. Those are the 4 things you'll be turning in for this one. Okay? And obviously your textures too go along with that. Questions?